Welcome to the channel, you who are passionate about inspiring and captivating stories just like us. Subscribe, it would mean a lot to us. In the first part of this story, Irina, the wife of Salomon, was cast out of her family along with her 4 daughters by her husband. He had married a new wife in his home to bear him sons. Here is the continuation of this thrilling story. Under a torrential downpour, Irina and her daughters trudged along, their soaked clothes clinging to their skin and their feet slipping on the muddy paths. The night felt endless, and each clap of thunder made the little ones jump. Naomi, the youngest, wept quietly, clinging to her mother. "Mama, where are we going?" Ruth asked, her voice trembling from both cold and fear. Though exhausted, Irina tried to keep her voice steady to reassure her daughters. "We'll find shelter, my loves. I promise we'll get through this." After several hours, they reached a nearby village. But their hopes were quickly dashed. Every door they knocked on remained shut. Some villagers, fearful of harboring a woman accused of witchcraft, murmured among themselves, casting suspicious glances in their direction. Finally, they found refuge in an old, abandoned house on the edge of the village. The place was dilapidated, but at least it provided a roof to shield them from the rain. Irina arranged scraps of fabric to create makeshift beds, and despite their gnawing hunger, they fell into an exhausted sleep. The next morning, Irina ventured out in search of food. She begged in the market streets, hiding her humiliation behind a forced smile. A kind old man, moved by her story, handed her a bag of bread and some vegetables. "Here, ma'am. It's not much, but I can see you need it." Irina lowered her head, tears in her eyes.
"Thank you, sir."
"May God bless you for your kindness." Back at the abandoned house, she prepared a meager meal for her daughters. Though the food was simple, she tried to speak to them with optimism. "My girls, we may be in a tough spot now, but remember, this is only a passing moment. Better days are ahead." However, the days turned into weeks, and their situation barely improved. Weakened by a lack of food and rest, Irina fell ill. Naomi, the youngest, often stayed by her bedside, praying silently. "Lord," she murmured one evening, "heal Mama. We need her." Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Salomon lived a life of extravagance with Aisha. Lavish parties, superficial friends, and the illusion of a perfect life occupied his days. Yet deep down, a part of him felt hollow. One day, as he watched Aisha laugh carelessly, a strange sense of nostalgia washed over him. He remembered the peaceful evenings he had spent with Irina, surrounded by the laughter of their daughters. Shaking his head, he dismissed the thought. "Now is not the time to look back," he murmured to himself. Elsewhere, an unexpected miracle occurred. An elderly, elegant man passing by the abandoned house caught sight of Irina and her daughters through a broken window. He immediately recognized her. "Madam Irina? Is that really you?" he asked in astonishment. Irina lifted her head, frail but grateful. "Professor!" "Yes, it's me." The professor, who had once been Irina's mentor at university, was shaken to see her in such a state. "My God, what happened to you?"
"Come with me."
"I can't leave you here." He offered them a place to stay in a house he owned but no longer used. Irina, moved to tears, accepted with heartfelt gratitude. "Thank you, Professor. You've just saved my family." In their new refuge, Irina gradually regained her strength. Her daughters, too, began to find hope again. The professor visited regularly, bringing them food and clothing. One evening, as they shared a simple yet warm meal, Irina took her daughter's hands in hers. "My darlings, we've been through terrible trials, but God has provided for us. Stay strong, for we are about to begin a new chapter in our lives." Settled into the house gifted by the professor, Irina and her daughters slowly began to regain their zest for life. The house, though modest, felt like a paradise compared to their previous conditions. The girls, free to play in a sunny garden, rediscovered their laughter and carefree childhood. Irina devoted her days to organizing their new life. She swept away the remnants of despair as she cleaned the house room by room. The light of hope gradually returned to her eyes. One day, the professor visited them again, this time with a bright smile and a basket full of provisions. "Irina," he said as he entered, "you look transformed." Irina gave him a genuine smile. "It's thanks to you, Professor. You've given us a new chance." After sharing a meal with the family, he asked a question that would change the course of their lives. "Irina, have you thought about what you want to do with your future?" She lowered her gaze thoughtfully. "I don't have a degree, Professor, but I've always loved cooking. People have always complimented my dishes. Maybe I could start there, cooking to sell." The professor nodded enthusiastically. "An excellent idea, and I'll help you get started." A few days later, he returned with a modest sum of money, just enough to buy initial supplies and some basic equipment. Irina, deeply moved by his generosity, promised not to let him down. "My girls," she announced that evening, "we're going to start a small business. You'll help me, and together, we'll rebuild our life." The following weeks were filled with hard work. Irina rose before dawn to prepare delicious dishes that she sold at the local market. At first, customers were scarce, but soon, word spread about her cooking. Passers-by were drawn in by the irresistible aromas, and many returned to taste her food again. One day, an elegant woman tasting one of her dishes exclaimed, "This is absolutely divine. You should open a restaurant." Irina smiled shyly. "Maybe one day, ma'am. For now, I'm doing what I can with what I have." Her daughters, proud of their mother, worked by her side. Sarah managed the cash, Leah handled orders, while Ruth and Naomi helped prepare the dishes. Their small business was becoming a family adventure. Months passed, and Irina's success grew. With the profits, she purchased a mobile food cart, allowing her to reach even more customers. Compliments poured in, and her name began to spread far beyond the local market. One evening, as they dined together, Leah, her eyes shining, said, "Mama, I'm so proud of you. You've transformed our lives." Irina, moved, replied as she embraced her daughters, "No, my darlings. We transformed our lives together. This success is as much yours as it is mine." But this was just the beginning. Irina felt that something even greater awaited her. With the growing success of her food cart, Irina began to dream bigger. Encouraged by her customers, inspired by her daughter's determination, and fueled by her desire to improve their lives, she started considering opening a proper restaurant. However, challenges remained plentiful and resources were limited. One morning, as she prepared to head to the market, the professor paid her a surprise visit. He observed the well-organized family business with satisfaction, noting how Irina's daughters worked with efficiency and enthusiasm. "Irina," he began, "I'm proud of what you've accomplished. You're an inspiration to so many people." She responded humbly, "Thank you, Professor. But I feel this is only the beginning." The professor smiled and pulled an envelope from his pocket. "Then let me help you take the next step. Here's a small loan to start your restaurant." Irina opened the envelope to find an amount she had never dreamed of receiving. Tears filled her eyes as she murmured, "You're an angel, Professor. I can never thank you enough." With this support, Irina rented a small space in town and made her dream a reality. Her daughters played active roles in the restaurant's opening, helping choose the colors, decorations, and even the name. They decided to call it the Table of Hope as a tribute to their journey. On opening day, the restaurant was packed. Loyal customers, curious neighbors, and even local personalities attended. Dressed in a pristine apron, Irina welcomed every guest with a warm smile. She publicly thanked the professor, acknowledging his crucial role in their success. The restaurant's success was immediate. Irina's culinary talents, combined with the energy and enthusiasm of her daughters, attracted a diverse clientele. Local critics praised the quality of the dishes and the family's inspiring story. One day, after the lunch service, a journalist approached Irina. "Madam Irina, I'm from the Stars of Dining magazine. We've heard about your incredible journey. Would you agree to an interview to inspire our readers?" Irina, a bit surprised but flattered, replied, "If my story can give hope to others, it would be my pleasure." The article, published a few weeks later, caused a sensation. "From darkness to light, the extraordinary journey of a mother and her daughters" was the headline. The restaurant's popularity soared, and soon Irina opened a second and then a third location. Despite her success, Irina never lost her humility or her faith. During a speech at a women's entrepreneurship conference, she declared, "The road has been difficult, but every trial has shaped our strength. It's not wealth or success that matters, but the love and resilience that sustain us." Sarah, now a brilliant young woman, stood beside her and whispered, "Mama, you're a role model for all of us." Irina smiled, pulling her daughter into an embrace. "And you, my girls, are my greatest achievement." Years passed, and Irina's business grew into a culinary empire. What had started as a humble food cart had blossomed into a flourishing chain of restaurants, the Table of Hope, with branches in several cities across the country. Each establishment was warmly decorated, with photos of Irina and her smiling daughters adorning the walls, symbolizing resilience and familial love. Irina, who had discovered a new calling in entrepreneurship, became a respected public figure. She participated in conferences, television programs, and charity events. Her speeches, filled with humanity and humility, deeply moved those who heard them. At an annual conference on women's entrepreneurship, Irina was invited as the keynote speaker. The theater was packed, with hundreds of women eagerly waiting to hear her. She walked onto the stage to an enthusiastic ovation, dressed in a simple yet elegant white dress that symbolized both her pure intentions and her humility. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began in a clear and composed voice, "I'm not here to talk about success. I'm here to talk about resilience. My journey has not been easy, and it never will be entirely. But every difficult step taught me a precious lesson. We have the strength to turn our pain into power, our despair into hope. She went on to share how she had survived abandonment, humiliation, and poverty while raising her daughters with dignity. Her testimony, filled with sincere emotion, deeply touched the audience. In the crowd, women wept, inspired by her determination. After her speech, a young woman from the audience timidly approached Irina. "Madam Irina," she said through tears, "your story is like mine. I thought about giving up on my project, but today, thanks to you, I know I can keep going." Irina gently took her hand and replied, "My dear, know that the greatest victories often arise from the greatest pains. Never give up. Your story could be the light someone else needs." Meanwhile, Irina's daughters each took on important roles in managing the family business. Sarah, the eldest, oversaw finances. Leah, ever curious and lively, handled communication. Ruth, the dreamer, managed creative concepts, and Naomi, the youngest, brought freshness and enthusiasm to overseeing the branches. United and determined, the family symbolized resilience in its purest form. However, as Irina and her daughters thrived, a shadow reemerged. Salomon, who had once abandoned everything for a life of excess with Aisha, saw his world crumble. Risky investments, extravagant spending, and constant arguments with Aisha had left him ruined. One evening, in a modest house he now rented, Salomon sat alone, a glass in his hand. The walls, once filled with laughter and happiness, were now silent. His two sons, whom he had considered his greatest pride, showed troubling signs of rebellion. The elder was frequently absent, keeping questionable company, while the younger was accumulating problems at school. During a particularly heated argument with Aisha, Salomon was confronted with a brutal truth. "You're nothing but a failure, Salomon," Aisha shouted, hurling a plate that shattered against the wall. "You've ruined everything." "Ruined everything," he retorted angrily. "I gave you everything you ever wanted. And where has that gotten us? You couldn't even keep your business. We're living in this misery because you've been incapable of managing anything." Her words struck him like a dagger. Later that night, as he reflected on his failures, he found himself thinking of Irina. The image of her calm, determined face despite the trials she endured haunted him. He remembered the days when she stood by his side, always ready to encourage and support him. One morning, while flipping through a newspaper, he came across an article that filled him with a mix of surprise and nostalgia. The article's title read, "The Table of Hope: How a Courageous Mother Transformed Her Destiny." The story detailed Irina's journey, from their separation to her current success. Stunned, Salomon murmured to himself, "Irina, she made it." For the first time in years, he felt a pang of regret, a dull ache deep in his heart. But that ache was also a brutal reminder of the choices he had made and the bridges he had burned. Meanwhile, Irina continued to inspire and build her legacy. Yet a small voice deep within her told her that the past hadn't said its final word and that a final chapter, full of truths and revelations, awaited her. Years had passed since Irina and Salomon had taken separate paths. Irina, now a respected public figure, was leading a prosperous and fulfilling life with her daughters. Little did she know that her past would resurface in a brutal and unexpected way. Salomon, meanwhile, lived a life marked by decline. After years of extravagance and arrogance, he found himself ruined, alone with his 2 sons and a wife who only fueled his bitterness. What remained of his fortune had been squandered on reckless spending, and he now struggled to make ends meet. One morning, as Salomon brought his youngest son to the hospital, gravely ill, he was confronted with a situation that would upend his life. The boy, feverish and visibly exhausted, urgently needed a blood transfusion. The doctor, a serious and compassionate man, spoke to Salomon in the hallway. "Mr. Salomon, your son needs an immediate transfusion. You're his father. Are you willing to donate your blood?" Salomon nodded without hesitation. "Of course, doctor. Run all the necessary tests." But when the doctor returned with the results, his expression was different. He seemed embarrassed, almost nervous. "Mr. Salomon, we have a problem." "What problems?" Salomon asked, alarmed. The doctor took a deep breath. "Your blood is not compatible with your son's. In fact, medically speaking, you cannot be his biological father." Salomon felt the ground shift beneath his feet. "Impossible. You must redo the tests." "He is my son. I'm sure of it." The doctor, visibly uncomfortable, responded calmly. "We've double-checked. If you'd like, we can also test your other son." In shock, Salomon agreed. A few hours later, the paternity test results came back. Neither of the 2 boys was biologically his child. The revelation was a thunderclap. He left the hospital, his face pale, unable to process what had just happened. Back at home, he confronted Aisha with barely contained rage. "Explain this to me," he shouted. "These boys aren't my sons. How long have you been lying to me?" Caught off guard, Aisha tried to defend herself. "Salomon, listen to me." I... Don't lie," he roared. "I gave up my family for you. I lost everything. And now you're telling me they're not my children." Under pressure, Aisha finally admitted the truth. "Yes, Salomon, they're not your sons. But what does it matter? You wanted boys, and I gave you boys." Aisha's betrayal shattered what little remained of Salomon's spirit. Devastated, he took the boys and left the house in a daze. But on the way, driving at reckless speed to escape what he now called a monumental lie, he lost control of his vehicle. The crash was fatal. Salomon and the 2 boys died instantly. A few days later, Irina, who had read about the accident in the newspapers, felt a strange melancholy. Though he had abandoned her and destroyed their life together, a part of her couldn't help but mourn the man she had once loved. In a silent prayer, she murmured, "Lord, I hold no bitterness. Grant him the peace he never found on this earth." Life went on for Irina and her daughters, but the event served as an important lesson for everyone who knew her story. The choices we make, whether good or bad, carry inevitable consequences. Irina, despite it all, remained a symbol of forgiveness, resilience, and unwavering love. Here we are at the end of this incredible story. If you enjoyed it, please like the video and share the video. We would also love to hear your thoughts in the comments about the need for a son in African families or on polygamy. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you.